All right, we are live. Dan Hindery, how are you doing today?
Good, Dave. It's gonna be fun drafting with you. We got
Yeah,
fourth
this was
pick.
a perfect timing, man. We were sitting
Yeah.
here like waiting for a room to fill, and then right before we went live, here we are. We got our room set up. Looking right now, we're going to be drafting from the four hole, and want to say first of all, we are excited to announce our partnership with Drafters. Right now, if you sign up with Football Guys. With the promo code Football Guys, you will get up to $100 in bonus cash, a 100% deposit match for all first-time depositors. So be sure to check that out. Dan, I thought you were the perfect person to have on for episode one. This is the contest that you won last year, $500,000 up on top, a $20 entry. We just did an episode where we talked very in depth about your strategy and kind of what you did here, but now we actually get to see it in action on a live stream. So, looking at the fourth overall pick, are you just kind of going off of ADP there, or is there anybody that you're reaching significantly for it for?
Yeah, I won't be reaching significantly. I think there's a pretty clear top 5 or 6 guys. So we will have a choice of 3 of those guys. And I think it kind of maybe comes down to positional, whether we want to go wide receiver or running back. So I'm assuming like Chase and Jefferson are going to be gone. And then probably one of Barkley and Bijan, maybe. So our choice might come down to like CeeDee Lamb or maybe like Bijan Robinson. So I don't know if you have a preference there.
I've been going after CD, especially with the
Yeah.
full point PPR. Just kind of as simple as we've seen what CD Lamb can do with Dak Prescott, and that's give you an overall wide receiver one outcome. So I like that. But Bijan, it's hard to pass up on him or Saquon here. So CD Lamb goes
Oh,
off the
we don't
board.
get a choice.
That Bijan or Saquon, who do you prefer between the two, Dan?
I think I'm leaning Bijan this year. I think he's going to catch a few more passes, and I'm slightly worried about how many carries and touches Barkley had last year, like considering his age. I mean, I still think he's a top 5 pick, but I'm okay kind of breaking ties against him, especially in like the full PPR format where he only caught like 36, 37 passes last year.
Yeah. And
So,
it's we kind of like right when the season ends, you're so enamored by how the season ended. And I remember thinking like Saquon Barkley and Jamar Chase, the clear 1 and 2, nothing's going to change there. But then you start looking at the touches and the history of guys coming off that many touches, and how good the underlying metrics were for Bijan. That I think that's a good pick there. Now, we talk about stacking a little bit. Obviously, drafters is different. We aren't looking for the game stacks as much as we are for team stacks. This is a cumulative scoring over the entire season. So do you find it to be advantageous now that we have Bijan Robinson? Are we going to be prioritizing Michael Penix later in the draft, or are you not crazy about the quarterback running back stacks?
I could go either way. Actually, I don't mind that one. I think it kind of comes down to the specifics of the team. I do like that one because I think if you're going to bet on the Atlanta offense in general, then it makes sense to go in on Penix and Bijan and try to get maybe one of the wide receivers. Because like the only thing between Bijan having like a number 1 overall season is just like how good is the supporting cast? Like is Penix keeping defenses honest?
Right.
Are they hitting some deep balls? So I do think in that specific case it makes sense. So like I wouldn't on like Barkley and Hurts, something like that. I think there's a pretty negative correlation between those two.
Mm-hmm.
But with like Bijan and Penix, I think that one makes sense because you're kind of just betting on the offense in general.
Right. And Penix isn't really going to take away from Bijan the way that Hurts would from Saquon. Penix, we
Right.
know he's a really good athlete, but it's just like not in his wheelhouse to want to rush the ball. And I feel like we went through this same conversation with CJ Stroud a couple of years ago, where off the charts athleticism, but he just doesn't like to run. And I feel like there's some of that
Yeah.
in Penix's game. Like he just doesn't like to. He'd rather check down.
Yep. And I'm hopeful he'll get a few like rushing touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, I don't think the yardage is going to be there. He might be like a 50, 100-yard guy for the whole season.
Yeah, and I think anything that you're getting on top, that's just a nice little cherry on top. But you're drafting Penix more than anything else for the passing volume that they'll have there. Now, Dan, I know when we did our show, you said that you are looking at a lot of running backs early this year, which I think is very much so zigging while others are zagging here. So we've already got Bijan Robinson. I already know that in round 3, we're really hoping that Chase Brown is going to fall to us there at 28.
Right.
But would you think about taking a guy like Chase Brown? His ADP 26.5. We're hoping that he's going to fall a little bit below ADP. Do you think 21 is too early to reach for a guy like him? Or are there some other guys that you'd be looking at with this next pick here?
So I have him exactly 21, but I do have McConkey ahead of him.
All
So
right.
for me, I'd go Lad here.
Yeah, and I think that's another one that I am just way higher on Lad McConkey than the market right now. I've got him as my wide receiver 9 in rankings. I prefer him to Rashi Rice, AJ Brown, and Garrett Wilson, who are all drafted ahead of him. So I love that value there. Happy with him. And if we're able to get now Chase Brown coming around in round 3, Bijan McConkey and Chase, can't really think of a better start
Yeah,
than that.
that'd be a great start. And
So
especially,
fingers
like
crossed.
part of the reason I like Lamb is usually McConkey and some of those top wide receivers are gone by the time it
Mhm,
gets back to you in the late second. But we got lucky there that it worked out. And I really like the just starting with one of each gives you some flexibility. And especially, like I said, I probably am targeting running backs these next 2 rounds.
mhm.
Um, and having at least one of each, you can be running back heavy, but not, I don't really like starting with 4 straight or anything like that.
Yeah, yesterday I did a draft where I got Amon-Ra St. Brown in round 2, but 3 of my first 4 picks I ended up with was pretty happy with it, but it was Christian McCaffrey in round 1, and then I got James Cook in round 3 and Brees Hall in round 4. And it was a nice start, but then I did feel like I painted myself into a corner where I was really struggling with wide receivers. So I ended up going with a 10 wide receiver build there just because I had
Oh,
to
wow.
take kind of
Yeah.
a quantity over quality approach. So it feels really good when you're 4 rounds in. It doesn't feel so good when you're sitting there looking at, Darnell Mooney as your wide receiver 3, which no
Yeah.
disrespect to Darnell Mooney, but that's a guy you want as like your wide receiver 4 or 5 in a build, not the guy you're relying on as a weekly starter.
Yeah. They were Chase Brown.
So Chase Brown's off the board. Who would you go with here? Sorry, we were
So I'd
getting a
be
little off
between
topic.
either Josh Jacobs or Trey McBride.
All
Maybe
right.
a slight lean towards Jacobs, but I'm pretty open between either of those guys if you have a preference.
I like Jacobs as well. Another guy that I'm just a little bit ahead of consensus on. Would have loved to get Chase Brown there, but Josh Jacobs, man, like we saw over the second half of the season, he was one of the few workhorses in the NFL. And I know I think the only reason he's getting pushed down now is because there's this narrative swirling around that they were running by necessity because they were trying to deal with the Jordan Love injury, which there could be some truth to that, but also they were winning games and they were looking good when they were just powering
Yeah.
the offense through Josh Jacobs. So I don't think that they're going to just completely fade Josh Jacobs out of the picture now.
Right. Yeah. It started to work once they really started leaning on him. And there was a stretch too where there were some games last year down the stretch where he'd have like 15 points in the first quarter. And then they'd either get out ahead and bring in backups or like
Mhm.
it just felt like he could have had an even bigger season last year. So I actually do think there's some meat on the bone there. And I love having these guys you can really count on every week for like 15 to 20 points in this format.
So
Um,
also, I do want to. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say, so like in this format, I do think you are playing it differently than an underdog or DraftKings in these like big tournaments where you're really focused on these kind of guys who can blow up the last 3 weeks of the season, like week 15, 16, 17, which a lot of time can be like the rookies. You take the
Yep.
hot rookies, you take the
Injury
guys
away running
who, in
backs.
case of an injured, yeah, you get the handcuff running backs. Um, it's harder to do in here because if those handcuff running backs, if they don't take over until week 12 or something, you're so far behind, you're not catching up. Whereas
And
like
that
on underdog or something, it one out of every 6 is making the playoffs. So it's just can your team get hot for 3 weeks at the end?
right. So I think I like this format better. I've actually been doing a lot of different platforms this year rather than just kind of like 100% on underdog. And I've been enjoying DraftKings. I've been enjoying drafters. I've been enjoying fast draft underdog drafters though. And it does feel like they have one of the sharper ADPs out there. I did my first main event entry last night and a lot of sorry Joes were getting thrown around as I would have
Yeah.
my queue filled up, 4 picks out, 4 players in my queue and just bam, 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 bam. And then I'm sitting there not really knowing where I want to pick. But I want to go back to Trey McBride real quickly because you talked about him being a guy that you'd potentially be looking at 28. I like Trey McBride, very good player, but this is one of those where I feel like I just really struggle paying up for Brock Bowers or Trey McBride. We know that they can be difference makers, but I feel like you can get similar production from George Kittle a couple of rounds later. There's a chance that Travis Kelsey could potentially rewind the clock. Tucker Kraft, Colson Loveland, Tyler Warren. There's some guys that you can get for really cheap that I think can break out as well. Do you think that, and I'm guessing you do since you mentioned his name, but you're okay paying up for Bowers and McBride this year?
Um, Not necessarily. So they're kind of like at the bottom of my list. I have a tier of 28 guys, I think. And so we
All
had the
right. That's
28th
perfect.
pick. So it worked out. Like, I do have Bowers in that. I guess maybe 29. I think, or no, I don't. Yeah, because I don't have Lamar Jackson in my top tier.
Mhm.
So it was like just kind of those 28 guys, and he's at the very bottom of that tier, which means I don't get him very much. Um, so I'm a big Alvin Kamara guy, both this season and in this format. I don't know if you're cool with him here in the fourth.
100%. Yeah. And I do like Tetaroa McMillan. If he comes back around to us, I'd be okay with that pick. But you made such a just a poignant thing that you said about Alvin Kamara is that he was basically doing exactly what Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry were doing, but he got hurt over the
Yeah.
last few weeks of the season and kind of out of sight, out of mind. So Kamara has basically been an auto pick for me. If he's in round 4, early in round 5, that's an easy one to make. So I like that pick as
Yeah. And
well.
especially in this format where, like, even if he does slow down at the end of the year, he's just racking up all those 25-point weeks throughout the season.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, there outside of Chris Olave, there aren't really any other weapons there. You got to imagine Kellen Moore. He has always tailored his offense to his playmakers. I think there's going to be a lot drawn up to get the ball to Alvin Kamara. So we're up here with this next pick. Right now, we're sitting at 3 running backs and a wide receiver. Guessing we probably want to look wide receiver here. Jalen Waddle jumps out to me. Devonta Smith, Cortland Sutton, of course. We could scroll down a little bit further. Calvin Ridley, Travis
Yeah,
Hunter.
I like pretty much. So I like Ridley. I like Devontae. I like Waddle. I don't. You want to call it?
I do like Waddle here. I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
just more of like I think as ADP kind of settles post Jonnu Smith trade, I think that he's going to move up, maybe only a half round or so. But I think this is a rare opportunity where you can get Waddle in round 5, where he can start to creep up. And of course, it's Jalen Waddle. People want reasons
Yep.
to be excited about him. I think once training camp opens and they say, "Hey, Jalen Waddle's healthy," and the Dolphins tweet out a clip of him doing something spectacular, I think that's all it's going to take for people to get back on the Waddle train. So he's a
Yeah.
player that I've been targeting pretty aggressively in round 5.
Yeah, I've been kind of mixing and matching some of these guys, these wide receivers in the 5th round. I don't have one that's like kind of head and shoulders above. So kind of like depends on the day. Sometimes I'm more excited about one guy than another, and
Right. I get that.
kind
So
of comes
so
and
with
goes.
I want to mention too, I brought up Tedero McMillan's name. He is going in round 4. I've been drafting him a lot in underdog, but you talk about the cumulative scoring here, the nature of how drafters scores. Are you likely to shy away from the rookies that you really have to pay up for, knowing that you might not be getting good production for the first quarter or the first half of the season, and that the late season stuff doesn't matter quite as much? Does that mean that you're willing to fade some of these early round rookies?
Yeah, I think it's like a case by case basis. Last year, like last year, I was pretty high on Malik Neighbors, but was fading most of the rest of the like real early round guys. And I was definitely drafting less rookies on this than I was on the other sites. Because again, like you're really trying to build up a lead and try to be at the top of the leaderboard early on in the season, because it's really hard to come storming back at the end, where if your rookies get off to a slow start, you're kind of buried. So, like I still do like Ibuka and some of those guys, but I like them a little less in this format, because part of what you're betting on with those guys is that they're peaking in those playoff weeks,
Right.
and it just doesn't matter in this. So,
And
and
and you
I
talked about the study you did where you saw that, like, the more rookies you draft, the less likely you are to advance, but then also the more rookies you draft, the more likely you are to do well in the playoffs. It's
yeah,
a great study, but none of that really matters on drafters.
exactly. Yeah. So this would be more like closely aligned with advance rate,
Mhm.
just the overall advance rate, because that's the highest scoring teams.
Yeah,
So
and
I'm a big like Trevion Henderson, RJ Harvey guy in general. I'm a little bit lower on them in this format, just because, like you are kind of factoring in like maybe it's a 50-50 split the first 6-7 weeks, and then they kind of take over at the end, is the hope. Like if you're drafting them in the 6th round. And I think that's fine on this. But it's a lot more attractive on, the formats where it's all about the playoff weeks.
yeah, and what I found myself doing on drafters is waiting till, like, the very late rounds to add some of these injury away rookie running backs, your
Yeah.
Brashard Smiths and your Kyle Manung guys and guys like that, at that point, maybe when our Alvin Kamara, the long season catches up to him, then we're kind of padding that with
Yeah,
hopeful rookie
exactly.
production here. So I know you said you're a big RJ Harvey guy. He's still on the board right now. We're doing okay with running backs as it is, but who'd be your primary target now with this 69th pick?
I actually like both the guys who are at the top of the queue here. So either
Yeah.
Harvey or Odunze would
Sometimes you
be
just let the other
so.
drafters make the decision for us.
Yeah, so I'm fine going 4 running backs. If you are, it's up to
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, let's
I,
do it. I like RJ Harvey enough, especially in full PPR. I think
so I
he's a
think
fun ad.
another thing, people are so just used to 18 round best ball drafts. With 20 rounds, it gives you a little bit of extra flexibility. So I feel like when you do start really heavy with the running back position, you can kind of take that quantity over quality approach late and just end up with a 9, 10, maybe even 11 wide receiver build to offset the weakness at wide receiver.
Yeah, or like the other way to kind of approach it is you can really hit wide receiver hard the next few rounds. And the fact that it's so easy to have 3 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends,
Yes.
you can kind of like do those by committee easier
Mhm.
and it's less costly than in an 18 rounder. Or you can even add like a 4th tight end late. It's like
That
a
was
big
something
key to my
James
success
Whitcomb and I would
last
do.
year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
yeah.
ahead.
So like, I had a lot of Mike Gesicki and Johnny Smith who were going super late. And those guys, as a combo were, just as good as the top tight ends. So you didn't feel like you were at too much of a disadvantage.
So, like you said, this is kind of the sweet spot for wide receivers: Jacoby Myers, Jordan Addison, Ricky Pearsall, Josh Downs. A lot of guys that we like here. I know you're a big Downs guy. I don't know how you feel about Ricky Pearsall. He's another one that jumps out to me. Jacoby Myers goes off the board. Is this a spot where you'd be looking at Josh Downs, or do you like some of the other receivers ahead of him?
Yeah, I like Downs. But like if you're higher on Pearsall, I like both those guys. So either one.
I am higher on Pearsall, but I'm always taking Pearsall instead of
Yeah.
Josh Downs. So this is a nice way for me to kind of mix it
And
up a little bit.
I do think
Um,
he's another one where I think I like him slightly better on underdog because you
mhm,
are kind of gambling on the upside. It's a little bit less of a sure thing. Whereas
right.
I feel like Josh Downs is locked into like 1A or 1B for sure.
Mhm.
And I think Ricky Pearsall is going to be that, but it's just kind of like you're gambling on it a little bit more, which in a really top heavy one, um, it's easier to gamble. Where I'm actually kind of approaching these like I just want to try to cash every lineup I build. So even when I was building last year, I was just kind of thinking, last year was a $15 entry and it paid out 30. Um, so you doubled your money if you finished in the top. I think it's like 16%.
Mhm.
So that was like kind of my mind was not necessarily on trying to build like I need to build like a monster team. It was just like I'm gonna draft a bunch of these teams and try to get most of them in the money.
Yeah, just
And
doubling up. Yeah.
that was probably I think in some ways I don't know more impressive, but like for what I was trying to do, I got 87% of my teams last year into the money, and that was kind of like my goal. And then so many of them were up there that just one of them kind of happened to hit bigger than the others a little bit.
And it's kind of funny. You hear everybody's always saying like swing for the high end range of outcomes on every single pick when you're playing a tournament in this size. And you just said, no, I'm gonna, play it a little
Yeah,
bit
it's almost
safer and ended
like
up winning it.
you've got like these people try to make their distributions like wider, so you're more extreme where like if you have kind of a normal distribution of scoring, but everything's higher, like your average is higher, you can still get those big scores in the end.
Yeah.
So I think we are kind of the way we drafted, we are boxed in a little bit on trying to go wide receiver here. And it's tougher to do on drafters than it is some of these other sites because these second tier wideouts just fly off the board. So I'm in
They
on
do.
Ibuka, Higgins,
I mean,
Pittman.
Puka would be great if he's able to fall here. Do we want to go and let me ask you a kind of game theory question here? We just took Josh Downs. Would you take Pittman in the very next round? Obviously,
Yeah,
trying to
yeah, I
stack
like
with
that.
Daniel Jones a little bit later, but the way I've got it queued up right now would be Igbuka is the first choice. Pittman just went off the board, unfortunately, but we got Jaden Higgins there next. Travis Kelsey is somebody that would have piqued my interest, but with him off the board, I'm kind of okay just passing on tight ends here.
Yeah.
Keon Coleman, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Ayuk, Trey Harris. It does get thin pretty quickly at the wide receiver position on this.
I think we're in a great spot here. We're gonna get one of these rookies. I've actually really warmed up to Jaden Higgins over the last few weeks.
Mhm. I
He
just
just feels like he's in a really great spot because I think you can. So I think take Ibuka, and I don't think Higgins will get back around, but it would be great if he did.
I mean, if you look at these teams right here, they have all gone pretty wide receiver heavy already. So these
Mhm.
teams, we might have actually done something kind of nice here with the build that we
Yeah,
have.
we're at yep.
We're the ones that are searching for wide receivers right now, and I think these
Yeah.
guys over here already feel pretty good about their wide receivers. So
Yeah.
we might just keep getting value dropping to us around these turns. After Higgins, though, there's some other names. Brandon Ayuk is one that scares me a little bit coming off of the injury. And talked with Adam Hutchison about this yesterday. We did an episode on injured players, and just
He
like
likes him, right? Or
he
no?
likes him in theory,
Yeah.
looking at the data, but there's just like weird vibes that you can't really quantify about like
Yeah.
Ayuk's entire career so far in San Francisco. He doesn't seem like he wants to be there. It almost seems like they don't want him there. Like there's just something kind of weird going on. So he said where some
Yeah.
players might be like more motivated to get back on the field. He doesn't know if Ayuk's going to have that like same fired up motivation to get out there that other guys would coming off an injury. Um,
And
but
that's another one that he's more of a playoff play too, where like you
yeah,
can talk yourself into it on one of these other sites where you're really just trying to optimize for the week 15, 16, 17. But a guy who might start on pup, that really hurts.
right.
You really, when bye weeks and stuff, like it's hard to get 6 really good scores every week. You're really shooting for, you want every position play. Oh, perfect. We got Higgins too.
And that played
I'm
out
really
just like
liking the
we
way
had
this is
hoped.
turning out so far. Yeah.
No other wide receiver went here, and wouldn't be surprised if again, like if we're still just hammering wide receivers here in rounds
Yeah.
10 and 11, if this little turn here just doesn't touch wide
We
receivers
can
again.
also, yeah, we can also just like move over to like quarterback, tight end. There's a few wide receivers I like kind of in the 150 to 180 range too. So we already have 5.
Right. And we
We can
balance that out
kind of,
pretty quickly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that worked out well. I think I feel like the team ends up looking a lot better if you can get a 5th wide receiver that you like.
Hmm.
But there is kind of a cliff there where like I don't know if I want to reach for like a Burden or somebody like that as my wide receiver 5. Higgins
Right.
is like the last guy in that tier for me, so I'm really pleased with the way that played out there.
And I think I was just on a 4 for 4 show earlier today with Jennifer Akins, and she talked about Jaden Higgins as one of her favorite targets. And it's just it's simple as like somebody needs to step up behind Nico Collins. Last year it
Yeah,
was Stephon Diggs, and he's gone, and the year before that it was Tank Dell, and he's gone now. And they made serious investments in Christian Kirk and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll. But I think if one of these guys hits the ceiling, or if all of these guys hit their ceiling outcome, Jaden Higgins is the one that can be kind of a Nico Collins light. He's a big field
yeah,
stretcher. He can make plays after the catch. He can win contested catches, win on the boundary. He's a big, physical, well-rounded receiver that I think just I don't even want to say complimentary to Jaden Higgins, but just like two guys that can do a lot of the same things. They can just give defenses nightmares.
yeah, yeah. I agree. And this is a good part of the draft where we played it really safe. I feel like the first 7 picks, or at least
Mhm.
maybe RJ Harvey is a little bit of a like kind of upside play.
But
But
these are all, yeah, these are
we
great
have a lot of
value.
like
And
really solid veterans who are going to give you 15, 20 points every week. So now we can start kind of trying to build in some of that upside too.
absolutely.
And I think that getting both those rookie wide receivers gives us, a chance to be like one of those teams that cashes if they don't hit because we have
Mhm.
enough up top. But then if those guys hit, that's when you potentially have like one of those fun teams where my one that finished at the top last year, when Lad McConkey started kind of getting hot midway through the year, just a huge boost when I needed it.
I'm seeing I'm a little new to this website, so I'm playing around with it a little bit, trying to figure out how much of the board I want to show and how much of the players I want to show. But we're up
Yeah.
here in 2 picks now. Still got a few guys on the board that we might be interested in here. No quarterbacks that we can stack. Trey Harris, we've been going
Is
pretty hard on rookies, so probably don't want to do that. Who are you looking for?
I was looking for Justin Herbert. I don't
I
know if
think
we might be able to get him at 124 though.
yeah, Herbert's still on the board. Tucker Kraft is also still on the board. I know a tight end that
Oh
you
yeah,
like
let's
quite a bit.
go. Let's go Kraft, and then there's enough quarterbacks. We'll get somebody.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel with quarterbacks. I pass on a lot of quarterbacks, and it feels bad passing on them. But then I
Yeah,
just end up walking away with like 3 quarterbacks in rounds 12 through 15, and I feel pretty good about those rooms.
yeah. We have still have some decent stacking options because we've got Herbert, we've got Stroud. I think is still available too.
Hmm. And I'm trying to think, Herbert. Did we? Oh yeah, McConkey. Duh, I'd
Yeah,
completely forgotten that we took him early. So yeah, so and like I don't know exactly how you have it ranked. Do you have JJ McCarthy and Drake May ahead of Justin Herbert in your rankings, or do you prefer Herbert flat out?
I prefer Herbert just slightly over Drake May. So
All
I
right.
have Herbert top of this. I think he's going to run a little bit more than
Yeah.
maybe
He had
some
a
people
career
think.
year last year as a rusher, coming off that
And
horrific
he was so
preseason
beat
ankle
up
injury.
early in the year. Yeah.
Right. If you
So like
just think
he's
of
in
what
one
he
of
did
those
over the
guys
second
too.
half, yeah.
Yeah. If he gets 400 or 500 rushing yards and a handful of rushing touchdowns, he could really really have a nice year. But I do like Drake May. He's one of this is kind of the tier of quarterbacks. I think the ones I'm getting a lot of are Herbert, May, and Lawrence.
Mhm.
And Penix too, actually. But those first three, I think you have some rushing upside, and they can throw for 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns.
And what I like about May too is even if you don't have Diggs,
Oh,
you can
Herbert gone.
that one hurts. So we got Jordan Love here, or JJ McCarthy, Jordan Love. I mean, CJ Stroud does work with us having Jaden Higgins. It feels like it might be a little bit of a reach there. We can look at some
We
other
could,
pictures as well.
yeah, I'm good with. I think we should try to get our QB here, but we don't have to stack. So if you like McCarthy,
Yeah.
or we could
There's
stack. We just drafted Kraft. We could go Love.
I'll let you make the choice.
Whichever one you like best. Let's go McCarthy. We get the dome, and
Yeah.
I think he's
And I
got a
think
little
there's
rushing upside too.
Jeff Bell and I, we just talked about Jordan Love yesterday on the Dynasty show, and it does seem like people are really excited about Jordan Love, and so like people are holding on to the hope from that first month when he got his start in 2023. But if you look beyond that first month, it's been a lot of inconsistencies. It's been more kind of middling QB2 production. And I think it's one of those, we waited so long to see Jordan Love. All eyes were on him after Aaron Rodgers left Green Bay, and it was
Yeah.
immediately like anointed him the next Aaron Rodgers, the next Brett Favre. He's cooled off quite a bit since, and some of that could be injury related. But I think the unknown with JJ McCarthy, I mean, he can be essentially a supercharged Sam Darnold, who Sam Darnold was given his QB1 production last year. JJ McCarthy has legs that Sam Darnold doesn't, still throwing to the same guys. I think, JJ McCarthy being a top 6 quarterback isn't that far fetched.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, I haven't been drafting Love very much. He's kind of at the bottom of this tier for me. So
Yeah, it's one of those, if he falls, a little bit past ADP and I've got a stack, I'll
yeah,
get him in there, but not a guy that I'm going out of my way to try to draft aggressively. Now with the next pick, I know a lot of times what I'll do in these kind of middle rounds is take multiple quarterbacks. We can look at some of the other positions and start throwing some guys in our queue so we aren't, panic picking while we're on the
yeah,
clock. We've got some running backs here, but we're already pretty strong there. These are mostly injury away guys. I'm guessing you're probably just overlooking these
yeah.
running backs for now.
I'm probably good on running back until I really like the two guys you mentioned earlier, actually, Rashard Smith and Commandant Guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And since we have 4, we can just wait and take some shots late, and we don't have to
That's where I
play in
am.
these waters where it's like I feel not necessarily dead zone. 'Cause there's a few of these guys I'm okay with, but I'd rather be drafting these quarterbacks who have serious upside through here than
You
kind
have
of trying to guess on Rashad White or Jaden Blue or all these other guys that are flying off the board.
So Trevor Lawrence sitting atop the queue. Tua Tagovailoa does work with us having Jalen Waddle. Bryce Young, you can stack him up with some cheap late options as well. Cam Ward is another guy that I like quite a bit. We are going a little young on this build right now with a handful of rookies, JJ McCarthy and Cam Ward. I don't know if that's the route you want to go. Who's the quarterback you'd be looking at here? Even with Trevor Lawrence, I mean, you can pair him up with Brenton Strange or Diami Brown later in the draft.
Yeah, I like Lawrence. We'll be on stack, but it's fine.
Oh my
Oh, we
goodness,
got sniped
Lawrence.
again.
Yeah. So
Um, I'm good with Tua or Bryce.
yeah, I
Who's
mean, in it,
available? Who's a wide receiver?
Romeo
Not
Dubs.
much.
I mean,
Yeah,
Quentin John. We got sniped on Herbert, or that would have been nice. I think in a
I get
vacuum,
Tua.
I
What
prefer
were you saying?
Bryce Young.
Okay,
Well,
yeah, let's go Bryce Young then.
all right.
And actually,
Uh,
one of my favorite kind of wide receivers in this range, if we can get him, is Leggett.
yeah.
Kind of buying into him having a little bit of a second year jump. There's been some pretty positive reports in camp.
My quick little vacuum pitch on Xavier Leggett is that he could just be this year's Quentin Johnston. That now that they have
Yep.
like a true X receiver that can take over the defensive gravity and be the focal point in game planning, Leggett is just a speed freak who can just get
Yep.
behind defenses and just rip off big plays. He doesn't have to even take a big step in his development. It just kind of hinges on Tedero and McMillan being good, and then Leggett can be one of the biggest beneficiaries there. So I like that quite a bit.
Yeah, and I do like the Bryce Young's rushing upside over.
Tua.
I like him just straight up over Tua. When I have if I have Waddle, it's a lot closer for me.
Mm-hmm.
But in this again, we're not as worried about stacking as we might be in some other formats.
Mm-hmm. And we could
So
probably wait. Leggett is still down at 164, so our next pick 165. We might be able to go there. Cam Ward just went off the board. Do you want to take Tua here for the stack, or do you think it's just worth getting Leggett now
you know
so we
what?
don't have to worry about it?
Yeah, let's go Tua. And
It's one
then
of those. I think the big fear with Tua, especially on underdog, is that like when the weather gets cold, he just turns into a pumpkin. But doesn't really matter that much, especially with us having JJ McCarthy, a guy who might get
yeah,
off to a slow start. That might theoretically, like a hot start from Tua, like we've seen in years past, could help offset any speed bumps early in the year for JJ McCarthy. So I like this. We're taking a very just I don't know the word I'm looking for, but intentional. I think maybe way that we're doing this draft. We've got basically all of our running backs now. We could sprinkle in
yeah,
a rookie or an injury away guy. We've got all of our quarterbacks now. We've got a tight end. So we're going to go one, maybe two more tight ends here. We're good on quarterbacks for the rest of the draft. So in these remaining rounds, we're probably going to be hitting receiver pretty hard, right?
yeah, for sure. I think wide receiver and tight end in these next few rounds, and then some of those running
Sprinkle in
backs.
a Monangai or a Brashad Smith late.
Yeah, exactly.
So Thielen, is that a guy that's on your radar at all? It's
Yeah, he is. I
crazy.
like
All right.
Leggett slightly more, but
Same.
I'm totally fine with Thielen too. So we can put them both in there. I didn't
Wan'Dale
think Wandale's.
Robinson, I'm not crazy about him, but I feel like I keep drafting him here because the full PPR on here in DraftKings, it
Yeah,
makes me kind of a little like he doesn't need to be good if he just has the same role as last year, and then a little
yeah,
bit of luck breaks in his direction. It feels like it could be a great pick, but also they might say you were awful in this role last year, and he's
right.
just kind of pushed out of the picture entirely.
I prefer Demario Douglas
Yeah,
slightly over him. So he's another guy who through here we can get. Can we see like what are the tight end ADPs? Because we probably need to get a second one at some point.
Kyle Pitts, Hunter Henry. That Drake May snipe hurts because I love
Yeah,
stacking him up with Hunter Henry. Demario
yeah,
Douglas, I know is this guy you said you like. Demario Douglas is one of my favorite picks in drafts right now. I think if I looked at my exposure across every platform, I'm probably around 70 or 80% Demario Douglas. Just
yeah.
took 5 times as many snaps out of the slot last year as any other receiver in New England. And now Josh McDaniels is back in the picture where it's going to revolve around that slot. So I like that. Got sniped on Trevor Lawrence as well, so Brenton Strange isn't quite as appealing.
Yeah. So I like Ertz, I like Kasicki, and I like Okonkwo. I think maybe we can go like wide receiver and then try to get a backup tight end at 172.
Yeah, I like that quite a bit.
We got three nice options up there.
So Zach Ertz went off the board. That was early for Zach Ertz. I was kind of
That is early
shocked
for
to see
Zach
him
Ertz.
go
Or
that
maybe
early.
we are going a little tight end run. I don't know if we want to go the tight end first or wide receiver.
Let's see. We've got this guy already has 2 tight ends. This guy has 1 tight end, and this guy has 1 tight end. So we might see 1 or 2 tight ends go around this turn here.
Let's go. Can we go? Let's go.
I do I like Leggett with the
Yeah.
Bryce Young pick. I think that's a nice one right there. And then I'd be shocked if both Gesicki and Okonkwo go around
It'd
this
be
turn
ahead
here.
of
So I think
ADP for both.
we'll be able to get at least one of those guys. But also passing on, I'm not crazy about passing on Douglas here. I mean, I'd be happy with any of these 3. These are all 3 guys that like. This is if this was a dynasty draft, this is where I'd be looking to trade up and get an extra pick right here because I like all these guys. But Gesicki, you're a Bengals fan. I know you're pretty plugged in. It seems like people haven't really caught up to what happened in Cincinnati last year, where Gesicki kind of became the slot receiver last year. They tried with Burton and they tried with Yosavash, and then about halfway through the season, they said, you know what, Gesicki's the guy. And if you look, his pace over the second half of the season was for 104 targets on a 17-game pace. If they just keep running back the same offense they had last year, Gesicki stands out to me as a huge value. Well, there, Demario Douglas goes off the board, so we're not going to be tempted by that one. I prefer Gesicki. I like Gesicki and Okonkwo, but I prefer Gesicki quite a bit.
Yeah, let's go.
Cool.
Like it. I really like the way this team's shaping up, which, I've done a few on drafters and
this has been
gotten through and they're like, yeah, I don't love this team. I really like the way this team's shaping up. We're just really solid across the board. We've got 6 wide receivers, like 3 really solid ones up top who I feel pretty good about, like, kind of every week. And then 3 young guys who give us some upside both weekly and overall. I do really like De'Ami Brown too. What's up?
Yeah. This just looks very similar to the team that I drafted last night.
That's
Where
yeah.
very similar. Like 3 of my first 4 picks were running backs, and then just hammered wide receivers in the middle round. And then I did pay up for Travis Kelce because he slipped a little bit. But outside of that, I mean, it looked almost an identical build to what we're doing right now.
It is like in this format, a lot of the luck comes down to the timing of your big weeks, where it's just like, especially on builds like this, where you have 3 quarterbacks that, are probably each going to average kind of like 18, 20 points, hopefully, is kind of like their upside. But then it's like, can you have one of them hit for 25 every week? It's just kind of, and you don't want like to have the weeks where like all 3 of them go for 25 and then the next week they all go for 15. So a lot of the luck in this format is really just like the timing of guys hitting, just kind of lining up with the way the rest of your roster. And there's not a whole lot of planning that goes into that. It's just kind of, it's up to the fantasy gods. And there's definitely, when I was watching some of those teams late in the year, you get down, it's like my first 3 wideouts were bad. It's like I need this last guy to come through. And for the most part, I got kind of lucky on some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a line? Because I found myself, especially on drafters with the 20 rounds, preferring in DraftKings 20 rounds as well. I've really been preferring 3 quarterback builds. Do you kind of have a line where you say, if I can get this quarterback, I'm okay with 2. And if I don't, I'm okay with 3. Because for me, it's like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels. If I get one of those guys, I'll add a second quarterback and be done. But just about anybody else, like even if I'm reaching for a Mahomes or a Hurts or something like that, I still prefer the security of having 2 extra backup quarterbacks.
Yeah, I guess the way I've been playing it is I'm not necessarily locked into only 2, but then I'm not going to reach. So like, if I get to like the 17th round and Daniel Jones is still there, even if I have 2 quarterbacks I like, I'll be fine with it, but I'm not taking those guys at ADP. So it just gives me the flexibility to be like, I'm fine with 2, so I'm not going to reach. But if I get to a point where like some of my late round targets are gone and Daniel Jones is still sitting there, I like Jones enough that I think, his odds of giving me a couple big weeks when I need him or give me a little bit of injury insurance if one of my top 2 goes down is more valuable than like maybe like an 8th wide receiver, 9th wide receiver.
Or that he rewinds the clock and rushes for 900 yards again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he at least has like weekly upside. Like there was a few years ago, he had like 38 points in week 17.
Yep.
And he was on one of my best ball teams that did pretty well.
So here
I always like him for that.
I threw Keenan Allen in the queue. He's a guy that I've just been taking because I expect him to spike as soon as he signs anywhere. I mean, I think the only reason he's here now is concerns that he might retire. Outside of that,
tight end, is there anyone?
Yeah, nothing. Kate Otten, Juwan Johnson, Dalton Schultz, Theo Johnson.
I don't mind Kate Otten here, but either one, Otten or Allen.
Let's go Allen here.
And I do like Juwan Johnson, Freiermuth, and we could stack Sanders up later too. So
it does feel like Freiermuth. It feels like it overcorrected a little bit with him now falling as late as he has. I mean,
I was like down at 215.
Yeah,
so I actually think I think there's enough guys there. Maybe we can wait on tight end if Otten's gone.
That's kind of where I'm at. I feel decent about the 2 that we have right now in Tucker Kraft and Gesicki, that we can add a 3rd insurance guy. But if that's around 18, 19, or 20 guy, I think I'm still okay with anybody really as a 3rd.
You mentioned Rashard Smith. Is it about time there if he's still there?
196. Yeah, that would be. I'll put him at top 2 as our next pick. Yeah, I like that one quite a bit.
Intrigued by him. I know I saw Bloom. He's one of Bloom's guys this year.
I mean, a lot of sharp guys. He's a Jeff Bell guy as well. He's a Bloom guy. Matt Waldman has talked quite a bit about him. I hear a lot of sharp guys at football guys that are on Rashard Smith, and ADP is starting to creep up a little bit. I hope we're not getting Darwin Thompson.
Yeah, he's a little higher here. The Darwin Thompson was rough. Yeah, like because he's 196 here, and I think he's like 215 or so on the other side. So,
and I noticed that when I was yesterday. I did take Rashard Smith though, because I was like, you know what? If he ends up being the smash pick we expect him to be, the difference between round 16 and round 18 is going to be pretty negligible. So I'm just still taking him. So we got
So the him and Manon guy, and occasionally Jarquez Hunter are kind of like the 3 late round guys that I've been targeting at running back. I do think that's nice. We got Brashard. I was
Cool.
gonna say I think 6 is a good number for running back. We don't have to because our top 4 are so good.
Yeah, and just for anybody,
But
I'll go through this roster real quickly for anybody tuning in late. We started off with Bijan Robinson, got Ladd McConkey in round 2, Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, Jalen Waddle, and RJ Harvey. So we did go running back heavy here with 4 of our first 6 picks being running back. Then we went on a little wide receiver run. Josh Downs, Emeka Egbuka, and Jaden Higgins. Took our top tight end here in Tucker Kraft. Got all of our quarterbacks, JJ McCarthy, Bryce Young, and Tua Tagovailoa in rounds 11 through 13. Then Xavier Legette, Mike Gesicki, Keenan Allen, and Brashad Smith. So we're kind of at a point now where looking at our overall roster, I don't know if there's like necessarily a weakness where it's like we need to get this position. I think we're done with quarterbacks, but we can add a running back, wide receiver, or tight end and feel okay about it with these next couple of rounds.
yeah, I think we definitely want a third tight end, and then other than that, we're pretty much just best player available. So
Yeah, so I think Freiermuth or Sanders, I think if either of them fall to this next pick, even, they might be a little bit ahead of ADP. I don't really care that much. They both work with the build that we have, and then we
Yep.
can just slam some injury away running backs and maybe a flyer at wide receiver to close this one out.
Yeah, should we queue up some running backs and wide receivers?
Yeah, so we could talk through that.
We
I know
mentioned
Dark Eyes Hunter. I heard you
Hunter,
mention him.
Abdullah, and Monangai are the 2 that kind of stand out.
How do you feel about
Um,
Blake Corum? It seems like you're in the Hunter over Corum camp.
I am right now, but I don't have like any clarity on that. That's there's kind of like benefits and drawbacks to doing these drafts before training camp. One of the benefits is that some of these late round guys, if they have big camps, they end up moving up to like the 15th round. So like if Jarquez Hunter, some of the, like if one of those guys is like really shining at camp,
Yeah.
you can't get him in the 20th round like you maybe can now.
Right.
But
All it takes is one report. Hey, Jarquez Hunter's looking good, and he might
yeah,
spell
just
Kyron Williams, and then he's a 12th rounder.
exactly. No, it's just kind of like this Corum Hunter thing. Like one of those guys is probably going to emerge as like the guy, and we don't really know which one it'll be as like the top guy behind Kyron Williams.
Yeah.
And we just don't know. So it's like one of those things where there is more guesswork involved. So it's like you're trying to kind of trade. There's potential to get guys later than they would be available, but then you're also taking on more risk. So
We got a question in the chat here from Jordan saying, new to drafters, 20 rounds. I see. I like that. He's asking if it's half PPR or full PPR. It is full PPR. And then any major scoring differences from DraftKings worth noting. The big difference here, as we've talked about a few times, is it is accumulative scoring. So you're not playing just to advance into the playoffs and then taking it week to week from there. This is just the teams that score the most points get the most money. As simple as that. Kind of like the simplicity behind how drafters builds these tournaments.
Yeah. And DraftKings also does the 3-point 100-yard bonus and 300-yard bonus. And there's no special bonuses.
Right. So up here is Freiermuth the pick, I'd imagine, because after Freiermuth, then we're looking. I mean, I don't know who sniped us on.
Sanders is still there. Either one is fine.
Oh, he is. Yeah. I kind of like Sanders for the stack.
Okay.
Do you have a strong take here?
I don't. I like both those guys.
All right, let's go with Jatavian Sanders. I do like that because then we've got also, not that you want to hope for injuries, but like or busts or anything like that. But if Tedoroa McMillan isn't the guy that we expect him to be, we could easily have the 1 and 2 option for Bryce Young here.
Yep.
Of course, we want Tedoroa McMillan to be good, and he probably will be, but we're not always right on those things. So Brashard Smith did go. Oh yeah, we got Brashard Smith. So we still got Kyle Monangai here. We got 2 picks left. Right now, we are currently looking at 5 running backs, and what do we have? 7 receivers.
Yeah, so maybe do one of each. I usually, all things being equal, I end up landing on 3, 6, 8, 3.
Yeah,
I've kind of, I can kind of bounce off because these late round picks don't totally matter in it. So I'm good. I like Monangai here.
And then we'll be looking for a wide receiver next.
I like Ray McLeod a lot this year. Actually, I think he had 66 catches last year, like really quietly, and they haven't added anything really on offense. So he's pretty locked into that third slot. And if Kyle Pitts is still kind of injured and stuff like that, McLeod could be one of the guys who benefits. And he's also, I like him because, again, their lack of depth. Like if anything happens to Darnell Mooney, who gets kind of banged up somewhat
Mhm.
often, or even Drake London, like all of a sudden he's the number 2 target in that offense, and can't ask for a whole lot more than that in your 20th round pick if he's
Right,
still
and
there. So
all these
he's a guy.
20th-round picks are dart throws.
Yeah, and I don't even mind. He's a guy I've actually been taking even in like the occasionally like 18th round on like underdog or 20th round on DraftKings, but I like him even better in this format because you always need you'll have those random weeks where you need like a 680 from somebody. And if
Mhm.
you get 680 and a touchdown, all of a sudden like
That'll
that's
play.
huge. Like just getting those 15 and 20s into the bottom slots of your lineup every week is the key to success on these.
Well, after we spent all that time hyping up Ray McLeod, he goes
And there you
off the
go.
board.
Yeah.
So of course, who are some other guys that you're looking at in these late rounds? Malik Washington, are you buying into him kind of occupying the same parts of the field as Jonnu?
I
Of
actually
course,
really like that. We have Tua too. Yeah, that's a good
we have
pick.
we have Tua
Westbrook.
and Waddle, and I mean,
Yeah, Tua model.
let's just say, we've heard about Tyreek Hill not being happy in Miami. Tyreek Hill gets traded, and then all of a sudden we have a very unique build here that
Yeah, yeah.
nobody else is going to be getting after us. So, yeah, Malik Washington, another guy that kind of out of sight, out of mind after a very quiet rookie season, but it was Matt Waldman and Sigmund Bloom again. Smart guys that we like to listen
They
to.
liked
And as
him.
soon as Jonnu Smith got traded, they were all over Malik Washington. So that could be a nice one that could work out for us.
Yeah, listening to Bloom was what got me on Jonnu Smith last year, which ended up being absolutely huge.
Yeah.
Good.
And then I'm trying to think. I don't think there's any late flyers. Like, would you Jalen Naylor? Is that a guy you're thinking about? Maybe since we have right now McCarthy and no other Vikings. Would I don't even know if he was drafted yet, but
I haven't drafted him at all this year, but I haven't been getting a whole lot of
McCarthy.
McCarthy, so that's part of. Yeah, he's totally fine. At this point, we're just kind of throwing darts. Josh Reynolds is supposed to be the wide receiver 2 in New York, which isn't worth much, but
Yeah,
at this point in the draft, it's not the end of the world.
right.
He's one
And,
of those guys who occasionally will have a game here or there.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's also the world where Justin Fields just is better than he's been over the last couple of
Yeah.
years. Takes that step forward, and then we're just assuming that nobody in this offense is worth anything outside of Garrett Wilson, and who knows, maybe Justin Fields is better in 2025. So I'd be happy with just about any of these guys. They all kind of work with the build that we have right now. I've got them in order how I'd prefer them. But let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit here and kind of take a look at the board and see if there's anything now with the benefit of hindsight that you would have traded here. These first few picks I like quite a bit. I mean, just like you said, maybe safe picks, if you will, but these are just outside of McConkey, he's a
Yeah.
year 2 guy with a huge ceiling, but Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, Jalen Waddle. I mean, that's just a slew of strong guys to build a base around.
Yeah, I really like our first like 9 or 10 rounds. And like if there's anything I don't know if Tucker Kraft would have got back around. That's the one where like I would have liked this team a little better with either May or Herbert there.
Mm-hmm.
But like you're kind of risking. There weren't any other tight ends kind of on that same tier as Kraft. So that's one of those where like you kind of wonder, could you have, if you went Herbert, could you have still gotten Kraft? If not, then I'm really glad the way we played it. But that's the one pick where like I do feel like our board at quarterback, we got sniped a couple times.
That hurt.
But other than that, it felt like the guys I wanted were mostly there.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of these slight changes we could have made. Like if we ended up, this just keeps popping up on me, but if we ended up with, let's say, Drake May over Bryce Young, and then instead of that, we probably would have taken Demario Douglas instead of Xavier Legette. I think I'd prefer a Drake May, Demario Douglas stack to a Bryce Young, Xavier Legette stack, but if that's what we're nitpicking here, are the our QB2 and our wide receiver 7, we're feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, I actually really like the way this one turned out, so we'll see how it does.
Cool. Well, I'll make the same promise to you that I did last year when we were drafting these teams on Underdog, Dan. If I win it all, I'll take you out for a steak dinner in Vegas this year, and on my dime. But
Nice.
want to thank you for tuning in. Anybody who watched the show, we're going to be doing this every single week. I've got a few guests lined up right now. We got Justin Herzig next week. We got Davis Maddock the week after that, and we'll just be continuing to do these streams every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then Dan, we're also working on a few weeks from now when training camp opens. Me, you, and Jeff Bell will be doing an audio only series, kind of digging through the training camp reports and news, It does feel like we're in that lull right now, Dan. I know you said you haven't been drafting a ton right now, and I am, and it just feels like I'm just drafting so many of the same teams because nothing is happening. There's no injuries, there's no news, there's no training camp hype. It's a lot of just speculation at this point. So it is kind of a lull in the offseason where I don't know about you, but I'm desperate for news, like actionable
And
stuff that I can do right now.
yeah, because it's like I think the market catches up to the news. It takes a couple weeks usually, but there hasn't been any news the last few weeks, so it's like I feel like the market's pretty sharp right now. But things start moving so fast in training camp that I think there ends up being a ton of value if you're really on top of things, because these ADPs just get sticky because there's been so many drafts and people will just kind of stick to the top of their queue.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys who deserve to move up a couple rounds based on the latest news usually only move up a few spots. And if you kind of adjust your rankings and kind of get aggressive on guys who you are feeling like some conviction about,
Mm-hmm.
you can build some really good teams. And I think especially in this format where you just have to hit on a lot of picks, the key is just drafting only guys you feel good about, even if it's like maybe reaching a little bit, or if it's not necessarily a reach, but it's like I feel good about this guy. I can see the upside case for some of these other guys, but I'm not like convicted on it. Like I can see it going either way. Where in this, like you can just, if you're getting guys you feel really good about, like just 900-yard guys, 1,000-yard guys in the 8th, 9th, 10th round, and then all you're really hoping for is a little bit of luck in terms of when they hit their spike weeks, and all of a sudden you're right there at the top with a bunch of teams.
And that's why, people get so obsessed over ADP, and my mindset all the time, like, let's just a random guy we were talking about, Xavier Legette, for instance. Let's say he does have that Quentin Johnson type of season and he goes for 800 yards and 12 touchdowns this year. If you took him at ADP or half a round ahead of ADP, or you got him 5 picks below ADP, it's not going to matter at that point. Like, you got him late in the draft and he smashed his value. And I think that's a good thing to wrap up on, is just not worrying too much about ADP, having conviction in the players you want to draft. One more thing, though, I want to say before we log off here is that we just started pre-order sales for our magazine. Dan, you were a big part of that. You got an article actually on best ball being a game of edges and kind of how to solve these best ball drafts. So you can check that out. It's everything you'd expect in a magazine: rankings, projections, mock drafts, but then also a ton more on top of that. We've got some fun off the field stuff. This does commemorate 25 years of football, guys. So Joe Bryant has a 25 lessons learned article in there. Sigmund Bloom has his 250, as you'd imagine. We've got projections from Jason Wood. Everybody on staff really showed up in a big way for this. We just sent it off to the printers a couple of days ago, so you can get your pre-order sales now. And between now and the end of the week, we're going to be knocking $5 off. We're going to be adding free shipping, and you're also going to get a free digital copy of our draft guide and our league constitution for all of our fantasy football commissioners out there. It's just a great value. $20 out the door. You get the magazine, you get the rookie guide, you get the commissioner, or the league constitution as well. So we just shared the link for that. The link is also in the description on YouTube. So please, help support football guys by checking that out. And also just a cool commemorative piece. If you're a fan of football guys, get a nice little book to commemorate our 25 years. Dan, before we sign off, any final thoughts or notes?
No, that was fun. This will be fun. I'm gonna watch all these next ones coming up and see how Davis and some of the other guys get some great guests lined up. That'll be cool.
It's always fun doing this show, just getting to learn from some of the smartest people in the industry. And Dan, that's why I had you on as my first guest here, because I feel like every time I am honored to talk to you, I feel like I walk away with some valuable knowledge that I can use for the rest of the offseason. So I want to thank everybody who took the time to tune in today. We'll be back next Wednesday at 2 p.m. with Justin Herzig. We'll see you then.